Before diving into this story of regret and solo motherhood, hit like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next chapter. This is an emotional roller coaster that will make you question the true price of success. The CEO's curse, the shocking hook. I don't need a woman with a belly. 4 years later, the billionaire CEO froze in the lobby of his own mountain resort because the twin standing next to the cleaning attendant had his unmistakable electric blue eyes. Alistair Thorne was not a man who usually raised his voice, which made the cruelty of his words hit even harder. They came out clipped, polished, and final, as only a man accustomed to ultimate power could speak. "I don't need a woman with a belly," he said, barely looking up from the report on his desk. His tone was not angry or emotional. It was dismissive, surgical, the verbal equivalent of a door slammed in someone's face. And the worst part, the part that would resonate in Eliza Reed's mind for years, was that he said it without hesitation, without guilt, without even realizing he had just shattered her. Eliza stood before him, her fingers clutching the envelope she had brought. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her large blue eyes vulnerable as the words cut through her. She had rehearsed this moment for days. She had told herself he might be shocked, confused, perhaps even annoyed. But never this. Never a callous slash delivered with such calm. She wanted to speak, wanted to tell him everything she had planned to say. But her throat instantly seized up. Her breath hitched in her chest, refusing to leave her lungs, and all she could do was stare at the man she once believed saw something special in her. Alistair didn't notice, or pretended not to. He kept reading, flipping pages, his expression bored, focused on numbers, profits, and meetings that apparently mattered far more than the trembling woman standing in his office. He didn't ask why she had come. He didn't wonder why she looked pale, nervous, or hurt. He simply dismissed her existence with that single, careless sentence. The envelope slipped slightly in her hand. Inside was the ultrasound, tiny, blurry, undeniable proof that her life was changing forever. She had envisioned placing it on his desk, envisioned watching surprise spread across his face, envisioned that maybe, just maybe, beneath all his arrogance, he had the capacity to care. But looking at him now, the image shattered as painfully as her hope. She swallowed, forcing down the taste of disappointment, and whispered, "Okay." It was the only word she could utter, and even that felt heavy, fragile, as if it might crumble. Her voice was barely audible, but it made Alistair finally look up. Their eyes met for half a second. His were cold and irritated, as if she were delaying something important. Hers were brimming with pain. He didn't bother to see. He blinked once. "Is that all?" Eliza nodded, because she could no longer trust her voice. She pressed the envelope to her chest, as if protecting the small life inside it from the man before her. She turned, walking toward the door with careful steps, determined not to collapse in front of him. The air felt thick, too warm, too heavy. The sound of her own heartbeat drummed in her ears, drowning out the distant click of keyboards and muffled conversations outside his office. When she reached the hallway, she finally breathed. Not freely, but enough to keep moving. Enough to get to the elevator. Enough to leave before her tears betrayed her. Her reflection in the elevator doors looked unfamiliar, pale, shocked, defeated. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the reality of her situation sinking in with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just heartbreak. This wasn't just rejection. She was now completely alone. She didn't return to her desk. She didn't gather her things. She walked out of the building into the cold afternoon air and kept walking until she reached her tiny apartment. Only then did her strength collapse. She sat on the floor, her back against the door, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She whispered apologies to the baby growing inside her, apologies she had no reason to make, except that she felt she had already failed. Hours passed before she stood up again. She moved slowly, packing one small suitcase, choosing only what she absolutely needed. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay here. Not in this city. Not near him. Not where every memory would remind her of what she had hoped for and what had been destroyed in a single sentence. By dawn, she was gone. The apartment was empty, the keys left on the counter, the ultrasound still safely tucked away in her purse. She boarded a bus heading anywhere but here, pressing her forehead against the cold window as the city faded behind her. Alistair Thorne did not realize she was gone. Not that day. Not that week. But one day, years later, he would recall that sentence, the one he tossed out so casually, and it would haunt him in a way he never expected. The miracle in the Rockies. Eliza woke up the next morning with a heaviness that seemed to merge her with the thin mattress beneath her. For a moment, she lay there in the dim morning light, staring at the ceiling and pretending her life hadn't changed overnight. But the moment she rolled onto her side, a wave of nausea surged through her, sharp and sudden, forcing her out of bed and into the bathroom, where she gripped the sink and tried to steady her breathing. Her reflection looked pale and exhausted, with the slightest hint of dark circles. She splashed her face with cold water, hoping it would clear her thoughts, but nothing erased the memory of Alistair's voice. Calm, dismissive, definitive, she spent the next few days drifting through the small town she had chosen almost blindly, taking the first bus that traveled far enough away from the city where he lived. The mountain town, named Pine Ridge, wasn't much. Quiet streets, low buildings, a grocery store that closed before sunset, but it felt safe in a way she desperately needed. The tiny rented room she found wasn't glamorous, but it gave her 4 walls and a door she could lock behind her. That alone felt like a victory after running through the night with only a suitcase and a heart that wouldn't stop aching. The nausea didn't subside. Morning after morning, she barely made it to the bathroom in time. Her body was reminding her of the life she carried within, a life that didn't care about heartbreak or solitude. She bought a pregnancy test to confirm what she already knew, though her hands trembled opening the box. She had hoped seeing the truth with her own eyes might bring clarity. But when the test showed positive, a rush of emotions crashed over her. Fear, awe, grief, love, each stronger than the last. The following weeks passed slowly, but relentlessly. She found a part-time job at the town's only cafe, wiping tables and serving coffee with a forced smile. The smell of food often triggered her nausea, but she gripped the counter and pushed through each shift because she had no other choice. She saved every penny, calculating expenses late into the night, trying to build a future from nothing. Her clothes tightened, her body changed, and she felt alternately fragile and fierce, depending on the hour. She never contacted anyone from her old life. She didn't have many people to begin with, and those she knew were connected to Alistair's world, a world she refused to return to. She didn't want pity. She didn't want advice. She didn't want anyone to tell her she needed him. She had learned painfully that she needed no one but herself and the tiny heartbeat she heard during her first prenatal appointment. Fast, strong, defiant. The doctor smiled warmly at the ultrasound screen. "Looks like a healthy baby," she said, rotating the monitor for Eliza to see. But as she moved the wand over Eliza's stomach, her eyebrows lifted. "Actually," Eliza's heart gave a hard thump. "What?" "That's 2 heartbeats." Her breath hitched. "Twins," the doctor confirmed with a hint of laughter in her voice. "2 little ones." Eliza didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so she did both. The doctor handed her tissues, and waited patiently while Eliza absorbed the magnitude of what she had heard. She wasn't just becoming a mother. She was becoming a mother of two. Two lives, two tiny hearts, two souls who would depend entirely on her. The weight was terrifying and miraculous all at once. Question for the viewer. If you were in Eliza's shoes, what emotion would have overwhelmed you more? Fear or joy upon learning you were expecting twins alone? Comment below. The months that followed were some of the hardest of her life. Her body ached constantly. Her stomach grew faster than she expected, stretching her skin and pressing against her ribs. She worked until the cafe manager gently insisted she cut back her hours, seeing how she struggled to stand for long periods. She found a job cleaning rooms at the small hotel across the street, lighter work, with flexible hours. A boss who asked no questions. She attended every doctor's appointment alone. She watched every ultrasound, amazed as tiny limbs formed, as spines arched, as hearts beat in perfect harmony. She learned about nutrition, newborn care, sleep schedules, and budgeting for two babies. She bought second-hand baby clothes, washing them carefully, folding them with trembling hands, and storing them in a clean cardboard box she kept beside her bed. She talked to her babies at night, her palms resting gently on her stomach as she whispered promises she intended to keep for the rest of her life. She never mentioned his name. She never allowed herself to imagine what might have been. But sometimes, when the babies kicked and she lay awake in the silence of her room, she wondered if Alistair would have cared even a little if he had known. If he would have softened at the sound of two heartbeats. If he would have placed a hand on her stomach and felt awe instead of disgust. But then she recalled his words, cold, dismissive, relentless, and the questions dissolved into silence. When the day finally came and she went into labor, she was terrified. She called a taxi, gripping her purse tightly, breathing through the contractions as the car bounced over potholes. The hospital room was small, but bright. Nurses moved with kind efficiency, offering encouragement she clung to like a lifeline. Hours passed in waves of pain and exhaustion, but Eliza fought through every minute because she knew what waited on the other side. When Owen was born, he let out a loud, furious cry that filled the room. When Alice followed minutes later, her first sound was softer, but just as determined. Her tiny fingers instinctively curling around Eliza's. Tears streamed down her face as she held them both, overwhelmed by the depth of love surging through her. They were perfect, dark-haired, blue-eyed, small and fragile, and impossibly strong. She whispered softly to them, her voice trembling with emotion. "I will love you. I will protect you. I will give you everything I never had." She didn't think about Alistair that night. She refused to let him intrude on anything so pure. She focused on the weight of her newborns against her chest, the tiny breaths, the small fingers clinging to hers. Her life was no longer defined by his rejection or the solitude he left behind. Her life was defined by the two children sleeping against her heart. The past had broken her, but the future, wrapped in soft blankets and held in her trembling arms, gave her a reason to rise again. Comment Pine Ridge. If you think Eliza is the strongest mother, the broken illusion of power. Alistair Thorne had spent most of his adult life sculpting himself into the kind of man who couldn't be rattled. He built empires, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and dismissed people, employees, partners, women, without blinking. But in the years following Eliza's disappearance, the armor he once prided himself on began to suffocate him. At first, he didn't notice the change. He worked the same relentless hours, surrounded by advisors who admired his ambition and feared his temper. But the moment he returned to his penthouse each night, The silence greeted him like a punishment he hadn't yet earned. He filled that silence with work, with numbers, with acquisitions, with anything to stop himself from thinking too deeply. His assistants rotated every few months, burned out by his impossible standards. He dated occasionally, never seriously, choosing women who expected nothing from him because he had nothing to give. Nights blurred into mornings, and the only constant in his life was the nagging feeling that something essential was missing. Something he had let slip away without realizing its value. He pretended not to think about Eliza, pretended she had been insignificant, a passing distraction, a mistake he had corrected before it cost him anything. But the truth revealed itself in quieter moments, the way he found himself looking for her laugh in crowded rooms, the way he stared at blonde women too long, the way he avoided certain streets because they reminded him of her. Sometimes he would even reach for his phone at night, his fingers hovering over her old number before he forced himself to put it down. He had no right to contact her. He had made it impossible the day he dismissed her with words that still echoed in his mind like a curse. He told himself she had moved on, that she had probably forgotten him, that she was living a peaceful life untouched by the chaos he carried. But beneath the polished CEO exterior, a guilt he didn't understand gnawed at him. He had pushed many people away before, but none had left a shadow like hers. He didn't understand why. He didn't want to understand. Understanding required acknowledging that he had made the biggest mistake of his life without even realizing it. As the years passed, his world narrowed. Success brought him no aha. Celebrations felt hollow. Even the victories he once pursued so relentlessly left him feeling empty. His board members noticed the change, though they never mentioned it aloud. His mother worried, sensing the loneliness in his clipped phone calls. Even his reflection in the mirror looked different, older, more tired around the eyes, like a man fighting an invisible battle he didn't know how to win. One night, after a particularly draining day of meetings, Alistair found himself in his office, long after everyone had left. The city lights glittered outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, but instead of feeling powerful, as he once did, he felt small, insignificant. He poured himself a drink, sipping slowly and deliberately as he stared at the skyline. He didn't know why the memory surfaced then, why it hit him with such force. But suddenly, he saw Eliza standing in his office again, the envelope in her hand, the trembling of her fingers, the quiet devastation in her eyes. The memory was sharper than it should have been, too detailed, too vivid. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he wondered if she had been trying to tell him something important that day, something that could have changed everything. But he dismissed her before she could speak. He shut her down without listening, without knowing. A chilling realization settled over him, so heavy it stole his breath. What if she had been pregnant? What if the life she carried that day had been his? What if his cruelty had forced her to disappear, not just to protect herself, but to protect his child? He tried to shake the idea. He tried to rationalize, tried to remind himself that Eliza was strong and independent, and if she had wanted him to know something, she would have told him. But the truth was undeniable. He had never given her a chance. He had shut her down so violently that she would have been a fool to stay. The next morning, he instructed his assistant to look into Eliza's whereabouts. The assistant tried. She checked records, reached out discreetly, verified employment histories. But Eliza had vanished without a trace. No forwarding address, no social media presence, no mutual acquaintances willing to speak. It was as if she had slipped off the map entirely. Alistair pretended the news didn't affect him, but the hollow ache in his chest grew sharper with every passing day. Something had been missing for years, and now he finally understood what he had lost. Her. He lost her before he realized she mattered. Months passed, then years. And though he didn't stop searching, he learned to live with the dull pain of failure. The cruel sentence he had thrown at her, "I don't need a woman with a belly," played in his mind at night like a punishment he fully deserved. He knew he had been arrogant, blind, foolish, and the possibility that she had been carrying his child haunted him with a silent, relentless cruelty. He never imagined he would see her again. He never imagined she was still connected to his world. He never imagined she had built a life that included 2 small children who bore echoes of his own face. But fate was patient, and fate had a cruel sense of timing. Years after he had driven her away, a routine visit to one of his hotels would lead him directly to the truth he had feared, avoided, and unknowingly craved. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. If you relate to Alistair's regret, leave a thumbs up. The impact in the lobby. Alistair Thorne walked into the Grand Riverstone Hotel lobby with the same confidence he carried into every building he owned. But something about the atmosphere felt different the moment he crossed the threshold. Perhaps it was the faint aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the cafe, or the soft hum of guests chatting near the fireplace. Perhaps it was simply that this hotel, tucked away in a quiet mountain town, Pine Ridge, he realized, felt more human than the imposing luxury structures he usually occupied. He didn't know yet that the change in the air was a warning, quiet, subtle, preparing him for what was about to happen. His entourage trailed in after him, his assistant, 2 regional managers, and a nervous young trainee who kept tripping over his own clipboard. They launched into updates and statistics, but Alistair barely listened. His mind was elsewhere. His nights had been restless lately, filled with memories he tried to bury. He pushed the emotion away, burying it behind the familiar facade of professionalism. He walked deeper into the lobby, his steps purposeful, scanning the space with the calculating precision of a man who misses nothing. He checked the decor, the staff efficiency, the overall condition of the space, details he would normally dissect effortlessly. But today his gaze drifted, unfocused, drawn instead to a distant corner where the sound of children's laughter gently echoed. 2 small figures tumbled into view, tiny feet thumping on the carpet, light giggles resounding in carefree bursts. A boy and a girl, maybe 4 years old, both with soft dark hair that bounced with every step, both with bright blue eyes that mirrored the exact shade Alistair saw in the mirror every morning. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The air thickened around him, pressing against his ribs like a vice. He stared, unable to look away. His mind raced through explanations, coincidence, imagination, déjà vu, but none held up. The resemblance was too strong, too sharp, too impossible to dismiss. The boy skidded to a halt, laughing breathlessly as the girl grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the reception desk. They were perfect reflections of each other, identical in features, save for small differences in expression. The boy was bold, curious, quick. The girl was softer, observant, cautious, yet bright. Alistair's pulse hammered. He took a slow step forward, then another, unable to control the compulsion that drew him closer. Every instinct in him screamed that this was important, that this was something he needed to understand immediately. His assistant was still talking beside him, but Alistair heard nothing. He raised a hand to silence the man without taking his eyes off the children. And then he saw her. Eliza Reed walked into the lobby from the west corridor, holding a stack of clean towels to her chest. She wore the dark blue uniform of the hotel's cleaning staff. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail that brushed her shoulder. Her face looked thinner, tired, older in a way that made Alistair's chest ache painfully. but she was still unmistakably Eliza. Beautiful, gentle, strong in a way he had never appreciated before. She turned to the children, her expression instantly softening as they ran toward her. The boy leaped into her arms. The girl pressed against her side, and Eliza laughed, a small, exhausted sound that conveyed more love than anything Alistair had ever given her. Her eyes lifted. She looked above their heads. And then she saw him. The towels in her arms slipped slightly. Her face went white, almost translucent, and she froze the way a deer freezes moments before fleeing. Alistair felt the air leave his lungs. It was the reaction of someone who had spent years trying to forget him. Someone who did not wish to see him again. Someone who held a life he had never known existed. He didn't move. She didn't move. The twins looked between them curiously, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Finally, Eliza turned sharply, gathering the children and trying to rush them toward the corridor behind her. Panic shot through Alistair. He couldn't let her disappear again. Not without knowing the truth, not without understanding. He took a step, calling her name. "Eliza!" His voice was not sharp this time. It was not cold or dismissive. It was strained, raw, heavy with emotions he didn't know how to handle. But Eliza flinched as if he had shouted. She didn't slow down. She didn't look back. Alistair pursued her. "Eliza, wait!" His steps quickened, and for the first time in years, his body trembled. Not with anger or impatience, but with fear. Real fear. She stopped only when she reached the staff corridor, out of view of the guests, out of view of his team. She turned then, her back pressed against the wall as she positioned herself between him and the children, shielding them. She looked nothing like the girl he had once so cruelly dismissed. She looked like a mother ready to fight for her children with everything she had. "Don't come any closer," she said, her voice sharp with panic. Alistair froze immediately. His hands lifted slightly in surrender. "I won't hurt you." "You already did," she whispered, and the words cut him, deeper and sharper than anything he had ever felt in his life. He swallowed, his throat tight. "Those children?" His voice broke, despite his attempt to steady it. "Are they?" "Yes," Eliza said, before he could finish. Her voice didn't waver. "They are yours." The truth hit him like a force of impact, stealing his breath and leaving him unsteady. He felt his knees weaken, his fingers tingle. For a moment, he thought he might collapse. His children, his twins, here, alive, beautiful, 4 years old. 4 years he had missed. 4 years he had thrown away. Emotions surged violently inside him. Grief, joy, terror, guilt, all mixing in a way that made his vision blur. He stared at the boy and girl, drinking in every detail, realizing they looked at him with curiosity, not recognition, because he had never been there, because he had never known, because he had driven away the only woman who could have told him. Eliza's eyes filled with a storm of anger and something deeper, pain, betrayal, fierce protection. "You have no right to show up now and pretend you care," she said quietly. "You have no right to rewrite the past." Alistair opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat burned. His hands trembled. Everything in him shattered as he stood there in the corridor, face to face with the consequences of the worst sentence he had ever spoken. He had told her he didn't need her, and now he realized he needed nothing else in the world. Not power, not money, not success. Only them. But Eliza didn't believe that. Not yet. And he didn't know if she ever would. He only knew one thing with absolute clarity. He would spend the rest of his life trying. If you relate to Alistair's regret, leave a thumbs up. Eyes like the sky. Eliza backed away from him in short, quick steps, as if any extra second spent near him put them in danger. Alistair followed her only with his eyes, unable to trust himself to move. When she finally stopped near the staff break room, she turned abruptly and gestured for the twins to stay close. Her breath trembled as she looked at him again, truly looked at him, and it was the first time he saw how exhausted she truly was. Not just physically, but in the way that comes from years of carrying burdens alone. He didn't dare approach. His whole body felt wired with a trembling energy he couldn't control. He kept his hands where she could see them, trying desperately not to scare her more than he already had. The twins were by her side, Owen slightly ahead, Alice tucked behind her mother's leg. They looked at him with confusion, curiosity, and something else he didn't want to name yet, because he wasn't sure he deserved it. Eliza swallowed hard, her throat visibly tight. "Why are you here, Alistair?" "I came to check on the hotel," he said softly, though the words tasted strange and meaningless now. "I had no idea you worked here. I had no idea you were even in this province. I've been looking for you for years." She flinched at the word, looking as if it offended her. "You have no right to say that. You have no right to claim you were trying, when you are the reason I had to disappear in the first place." He nodded, unable to argue because she was right. He had been the one who drove her away. He had been the reason she fled. And now he was the one dealing with the consequences of his own arrogance. "I know," he whispered. "But Eliza, please, let me understand. Let me talk to them. Let me be here." Her eyes flashed with the mixture of raw pain and fierce protection. "You think you can just walk into their lives after 4 years, after what you said to me?" He took a shaky breath. "No, I don't think that. I know I don't deserve it, but I can't leave now. Not after seeing them. Not after seeing you." Owen tilted his head, studying Alistair with a thoughtful seriousness far beyond his age. "Mommy, why is he looking at us like that?" Eliza immediately knelt and stroked his face, forcing her voice into a steady softness for her son. "Because he's a stranger, sweetie, and strangers shouldn't stare." The words stung, but Alistair didn't protest. He understood what she was doing, protecting her children by distancing them from a man who had once hurt her. Alice peered out from behind Eliza's arm, her small fingers tugging on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, he has the same eyes as Owen." The sentence hit harder than anything Eliza had said. She froze. Owen blinked slowly, turning to Alistair with renewed curiosity. "You do look a little like him," he said innocently. "Like the sky." Alistair felt his breath catch in his chest. He had never imagined hearing his own children notice their resemblance to him could be so exquisitely painful and beautiful. Eliza's fingers tightened around Owen's shoulder. "Children notice everything," she murmured under her breath, mainly to herself, as if trying to regain control of the situation. He forced himself to speak gently. "Eliza, please, give me 5 minutes with them. Just 5. I swear I won't cross any boundary you set." She hesitated. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes flickered from him to the twins and back. She was thinking, calculating, fearing, remembering. And Alistair saw every emotion flashing across her face. He wished he could erase the memory of himself in her mind. He wished he could go back and undo everything that led to this moment. But life didn't work that way. He knew he could never undo what he had done. He could only try to show her he was no longer the same man. Finally, she exhaled shakily. 5 minutes. Outside, where there are people around, and you don't touch them without permission from me or them." He nodded immediately, gratitude surging through his chest so quickly it almost hurt. "Thank you. I won't forget this, Eliza." "Don't thank me," she said quietly. "This is for them, not for you." A try in the garden. They walked out into the hotel garden, a tranquil space with stone benches and scattered flower beds. Eliza kept the twins close, and Alistair stayed several yards away, fearful of crossing any invisible line. He didn't know how to talk to children, let alone his own. But when Owen approached him with a determined little face, holding a small toy truck in his hand, Alistair almost lost his footing from the emotion that washed over him. "Do you know how to fix wheels?" Owen asked with the seriousness of a child expecting the world. "Mine is stuck." Alistair slowly crouched down, kneeling so as not to tower over the boy. "I can try," he said, his voice soft and careful. "Can I see it?" Owen placed the truck in his hands without hesitation. Alistair's fingers trembled slightly, but he managed to loosen the tiny wheel and snap it back into place. Owen gasped in awe, then burst into a wide smile that seemed to ignite something dormant inside Alistair's chest. Alice watched, then cautiously stepped closer. "Do you know how to braid hair?" she asked shyly. "Mommy says my hair is slippery." Alistair blinked, surprised by the question. "No," he admitted honestly, "but I can learn if you want." Alice nodded slowly, seeming to approve. Eliza watched from a distance, her arms tightly crossed. She didn't interfere, but her whole body was tense, ready to pull the children away the moment she sensed anything wrong. Her eyes were sharp and vigilant, but there was something else hidden deep behind the anger. The fear of allowing herself to trust him again. The 5 minutes stretched into 10, then 20. Eliza finally walked forward, her voice firm. "That's enough for today." Owen and Alice protested, but she took their hands gently. Alistair stood as she approached, his heart pounding. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that showed her he was no longer that cold, careless man. But all he managed was a quiet, "Thank you for letting me meet them." Eliza didn't answer. She simply nodded once, her expression unreadable, and walked away with the twins. Alistair stayed there long after they were gone, feeling the world tilt beneath his feet. For the first time in years, something inside him broke open. Not grief, but a desperate, furious determination. He had lost 4 years. 4 years he could never get back, but he wouldn't lose a fifth. Not if he had any power left to fight for them. The debt of absence, Gya, had not intended for Alistair to become a frequent presence in their lives, but life has a way of skipping every rule we try to impose on it. After their first encounter, she assumed he would disappear again, that his guilt would fade, and he would return to his world of marble offices and quarterly profits, but he didn't. The next morning he returned, and the morning after that, and the next. He showed up with a patience she didn't expect, a consistency she didn't trust, and a quiet humility she didn't know he was capable of possessing. He never stormed in, never demanded to see the children, never used his power or status to intimidate her. Instead, he would text her a simple question every time. "Is today a good day to visit the twins?" If she said no, he didn't argue. If she said yes, he arrived early and waited outside until she was ready. It was strange, even unsettling, to see him so careful, so considerate, so unlike the man who had once dismissed her as nothing. The twins grew accustomed to him quickly, far faster than Eliza expected. Owen adored him first. The boy had a bold, brave heart, one that recognized sincerity faster than adults. Every time Alistair walked into the garden, Owen would run toward him with an excitement that made Eliza's stomach clench. She could no longer deny the truth. Her son saw something good in the man she feared. Alice took longer. At first, she stayed close to Eliza, watching the way Alistair moved, the way he spoke, the way he reacted when Owen tugged on his sleeve. She was quieter, more cautious, but her trust grew steadily with each passing day, until one afternoon she approached Alistair on her own, holding a tiny pink flower she had picked from the garden, and gently placed it in his palm. The moment almost broke him. Eliza saw it in the way he froze, in the way tears instantly formed but didn't fall, in the way he swallowed hard before kneeling to her height and saying, "Thank you," in a voice that trembled slightly. Alice smiled, and Eliza's heart tightened with something bittersweet and terrifying. Day after day, a fragile rhythm formed. The twins played near the fountain, or chased butterflies, or built small rock towers beside the benches. Alistair joined them on the ground without hesitation, ruining expensive pants without caring. He learned to fix small toys, to count to 20 in 3 different silly voices, to interpret Alice's expression when she wanted a hug but was too shy to ask. He learned what snacks Owen hated and what stories made both children burst into giggles. He learned them, truly learned them, in a way Eliza never imagined he would want to. And she watched. She didn't participate at first. She stayed on the sidelines with her arms crossed, monitoring every interaction, every moment, every smile. But as the weeks passed, the tension in her shoulders eased. She found herself sitting on the bench instead of standing. She found herself answering when Alistair asked her about the twins' favorite foods or bedtime routines. She found herself catching him looking at her with soft, complicated eyes, which he quickly hid whenever she noticed. One afternoon, after an especially exhausting work shift, Eliza brought the twins to the garden, expecting a short visit. Instead, she arrived to find Alistair already there, dressed casually for the first time she had ever seen him. He wore a worn gray t-shirt and jeans, his dark hair slightly ruffled, as if he had been sitting on the grass for a while. He didn't look like a CEO that day. He looked like a man who belonged exactly where he was, waiting for his children. Owen ran straight into his arms. Alice followed, slower, but smiling. Eliza watched them laugh together, her throat tightening. Something deep inside her stirred, fear mixed with longing, resentment mixed with warmth, scars mixed with healing. She walked toward them slowly, unsure why her legs felt shaky. Alistair looked up at her, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Hi," he said gently. "I didn't want to bother you. They just wanted to show me the drawings they made yesterday." "You're not bothering," she said quietly, surprising herself with the honesty of the words. He froze for a second, and something fragile flickered across his face. Hope, disbelief, gratitude. Later, when the twins ran off to chase a butterfly, Alistair and Eliza sat beside each other on the bench, though a polite distance still remained between them. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the garden. The fountain burbled softly. The air smelled of wet leaves and warm earth. It felt peaceful in a way Eliza hadn't experienced in years. "I know I haven't earned anything from you," Alistair said, keeping his eyes on the twins. "Not trust, not forgiveness, not even this time with them. But I'm grateful you let me try." Eliza swallowed. "I never wanted to raise them alone." The confession slipped out before she could pull it back. Alistair's head snapped toward her, his expression hurt, regretful, raw. "You shouldn't have had to," he said quietly. "If I had known." She shook her head. "You didn't want to know." He winced. The truth crushed him every time she said it, and she knew it. But she wasn't trying to hurt him. She was simply stating the reality he had created. "I'm not asking for anything," Alistair said slowly. "Not yet. Not from you. I just want to be someone they can count on. Someone who is there." "You think you can be that?" she asked quietly. He looked at her then, completely and deeply, his blue eyes burning with a sincerity she didn't expect. "I'm already trying," he whispered, "and I'll keep trying every day you let me." She didn't respond immediately. She looked at the twins, watched their joy, watched the way Alistair lit it up simply by being near them. When she finally spoke, her voice was firmer than it felt. "They like you," she said. His breath hitched. "I like them more than I ever thought possible." "And me?" she asked, before she could stop herself. He turned to her again. but this time his gaze softened in a way that made her heart race. You are the person I wish I had been smart enough to value from the start." Her breath faltered. Her heart tightened. She looked away quickly, scared by the weight of those words. Before she could answer, Alice ran to the bench and climbed onto Alistair's lap without hesitation. Owen followed, pressing against his other side. The twins leaned into him as if they had always known him, always trusted him, always belonged to him. And Eliza saw it clearly, more clearly than she wanted to. Alistair Thorne was not the same man she had fled. He was not the man who dismissed her. He was not the man who rejected a future with her. He was someone new, someone changed, someone who loved his children, someone who still, dangerously, impossibly, might love her. And she wasn't sure she was ready for that truth. But one thing was certain. She was no longer pushing him away. The trial by fire. Eliza had weathered many tough nights in the last 4 years, but none scared her like this one. It started small, Alice rubbing her eyes more than usual, leaning into Eliza's side with less energy than her twin. Eliza assumed she was tired after a long day. But by dinner, Alice pushed her food away, her cheeks flushed, her small body unsteady as she curled into Eliza's lap. When Eliza touched her forehead, her heart lurched. The heat radiating from Alice's skin was too much for a simple fatigue. In an hour, the fever spiked. Alice's breathing quickened. Her limbs trembled slightly as she huddled into a ball, softly whimpering. Eliza tried everything she knew. Cool cloths, gentle rocking, whispered comfort. But nothing helped. Panic surged within her like a tide. She had dealt with fevers before, but this felt different, more dangerous, as if something terrible lay just beneath the surface. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers, hesitated for a split second, and then dialed the one person she knew would come immediately. Alistair answered on the first ring. "Eliza." His voice was alert, sharp with concern even before she spoke. "It's Alice," she said, her breath shaking. "Her fever won't break. And please, I can't do this alone. I'm on my way." There was no hesitation, no question, no irritation. Just a burst of movement on his end, and the sound of a door slamming behind him. He arrived in 8 minutes. Eliza didn't know how he managed it. When he burst into the small living room barefoot and wearing only sweatpants and a t-shirt, he looked nothing like the polished CEO she used to know. His hair was ruffled, his chest rising and falling quickly, his eyes wide with fear as he took in the sight of the small, trembling girl huddled against Eliza. "Let me see her," he said quietly, kneeling beside them. Eliza slid Alice into his arms, her heart twisting painfully at how naturally her daughter fit against his chest. Alice's tiny fingers clutched at his shirt fabric as she whimpered, her face pressed into his shoulder. Alistair swallowed hard, stroking her back gently with a tenderness Eliza never imagined he possessed. "We have to take her to the hospital," he said, his voice strained with barely controlled fear. Eliza nodded, grabbing her purse, barely managing to hold back tears. Owen clung to her leg, scared, and Alistair lifted him without thinking, murmuring words of comfort as they rushed out to the car. He buckled both children in with shaking hands, glancing at Alice every few seconds, as if he feared she might slip away from him. The drive was a blur of speeding headlights and shallow breaths. Eliza sat in the back seat with Alice in her lap, feeling the heat radiating from her daughter's skin. Alistair drove with both hands gripping the wheel, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. He kept checking them in the rearview mirror, his eyes dark with worry every time Alice whimpered. At the hospital, nurses rushed them back immediately. Alistair stayed glued to Eliza's side as the medical team placed Alice on the examination bed, checking her temperature, pulse, and respiration. Eliza's hands shook uncontrollably. She tried to focus on the doctor's explanation, but the words blurred. Alistair lightly touched her shoulder. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." She didn't know how much she needed those words until she heard them. She allowed herself to lean into him, just slightly. As the doctor explained the diagnosis, a sudden viral infection causing a dangerously high fever, they would give Alice fluids, anti-fever medication, and monitor her overnight. When they finally settled into a small room, Alice lay curled under a blanket, hooked up to an IV, her small breaths shallow but steadier. Owen slept in Eliza's lap, exhausted from crying. Alistair sat in the chair next to the hospital bed, elbows on his knees, his hands covering his face for a long moment. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, and the expression he wore almost broke her. "This is my fault," he whispered. Eliza froze. "What? No, Alistair, it's a virus. Don't—" "I missed everything," he said, his voice cracking. "All of it. Their birth, their first word, their first steps. Every moment she needed me, and now I'm here for the worst." Eliza opened her mouth to protest, but the pain in his expression silenced her. He wasn't blaming himself for the illness. He was blaming himself for the years of absence he could never undo. He looked at Alice with a grief so raw that Eliza's defenses crumbled. "She's going to be okay," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You didn't cause this." He looked at her, and his voice softened to something unbearably sincere. I wish I had been there for everything. For you. For them." The silence settled between them, but it wasn't the cold silence of years ago. It was fragile, warm, trembling with a vulnerability neither of them knew how to express. Hours passed. Eliza finally drifted into a light, exhausted sleep, with Owen in her arms. Alistair stayed awake all night, his eyes never leaving Alice. He watched her chest rise and fall, adjusting her blanket gently, his hand hovering protectively. When the first soft rays of dawn entered the room, Alice opened her eyes, weak but awake. Alistair leaned in instantly, his voice quiet, but brimming with relief. "Hi, sweetie. You scared us." Alice blinked slowly and whispered, "Daddy." The word slipped out naturally, unconsciously, without hesitation. Eliza snapped awake, her eyes flying open. She looked at her daughter, then at Alistair, who froze completely, his lips parted, breathless. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as emotion flooded his face. He reached for Alice's hand, gripping it gently. "Yes," he said, in a voice that broke. "I'm right here." Eliza felt tears well up in her eyes, not from fear, but from something much deeper. Something she had been fighting for months, something she no longer had the strength to deny. Alice drifted back to sleep, her small hand still wrapped around Alistair's. He didn't let go, and Eliza, looking at him through blurred eyes, knew with painful clarity that the man she had feared for so long was gone. The man sitting beside her now, tired, vulnerable, terrified, devoted, was someone completely different. Someone her children needed. Someone her heart, despite everything, was not sure it could resist any longer. The final boundary. Eliza took Alice home 2 days later, exhausted but relieved, carrying her daughter as if she were the most precious, fragile thing in the world. Alistair insisted on driving them, driving slowly, checking the mirrors every few seconds, terrified that the slightest bump might bother Alice or scare Owen. When they arrived at the small apartment, he carried the bags unasked and hovered near the doorway, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome to step further inside. Eliza noticed his hesitation, noticed the way his hand trembled around the diaper bag strap, and surprised them both by saying quietly, "You can come in." For a moment he stepped inside, looking around with a strange mix of curiosity and guilt. The apartment was small but clean, filled with children's drawings, mismatched toys, and small details that made a home feel warm. Things Eliza had built on her own. Things he had never contributed to. Owen immediately grabbed Alistair's hand and pulled him toward the living room, eager to show him the blanket fort he and Alice had built the previous week. Alice, still tired, cuddled next to Eliza on the sofa. Alistair didn't sit right away. He stood near the armchair, watching the twins settle, watching every detail as if memorizing the room piece by piece. Eliza handed Alice a glass of water and placed a blanket around her legs. When she finally met Alistair's eyes, he offered a small, almost shy smile, something she had never seen on his face before. "You should rest," he said softly. She leaned back against the sofa, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "I can't. Not yet. My mind keeps running." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I stay? Just for today? You don't have to talk. I'll sit here and be quiet. I just want to help if anything happens." Eliza felt something warm flicker in her chest. Not quite trust, but something close. "It's okay," she said. "Stay." The day wore on quietly. The twins took naps. Eliza dozed in intervals, and Alistair sat in the armchair without moving, watching over all three of them, like a silent guardian. When Alice whimpered in her sleep, he was the first to stand, adjusting her blanket gently. When Owen asked for a snack, Alistair found it and cut the fruit into small pieces, as he had seen Eliza do. Every action was soft, measured, almost reverent. By evening, the apartment felt strangely peaceful. Eliza heated soup on the stove, while Alistair helped Owen build a tower out of wooden blocks. She watched them, occasionally glancing away when emotion swelled too strongly. Seeing him like this, a man who once dismissed her, now completely devoted, was overwhelming in ways she hadn't prepared for. After dinner, Eliza stepped out onto the small balcony for fresh air. She rested her hands on the railing and closed her eyes, feeling the cool breeze graze her cheeks. She wasn't surprised when she felt Alistair join her a moment later. He stayed a respectful distance away, leaning on the opposite side of the railing. For a while, they watched the faint lights of the town below without speaking. He broke the silence first. "Eliza," he said quietly, "I need to say something, and I need you to hear all of it." She didn't look at him. "Go ahead." "I can't change the past," he said, his voice strained with regret. "I can't undo the sentence I threw at you. I can't undo the 4 years I stole from myself and from them. But I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for even a fraction of what I missed." She still didn't turn to him, but her fingers tightened slightly on the railing. He continued, his voice firm, but filled with emotion. "Seeing Alice in that hospital bed nearly destroyed me. I realized I'm not afraid of losing money or power or my career. I'm afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of losing them. I'm afraid because, for the first time in my life, something matters more to me than myself." His breath hitched, barely audible. He turned to her then, forcing himself to speak truths he had buried for years. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect overnight trust. But I want to be here, Eliza. Every day, every morning, every night. I want to be the man I should have been from the start. Not for a week, not for a month. Forever." She finally met his eyes, her expression conflicted, hurt, but undeniably moved. "Alistair, I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "You hurt me so deeply. You shattered everything I believed about myself. I built this life alone because I had to." "I know," he said, stepping closer, slowly and cautiously. "But you don't have to stay alone. People don't change that easily," she said. He shook his head. "I didn't change easily. It took 4 years of emptiness to realize what I threw away. And every day since I found you again has proven to me that I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be better for them. And for you, if you'll let me." Her eyes softened, filling with tears. She tried to blink them away, quickly wiping her cheek, ashamed. "I don't know if I can ever trust you completely. Not yet." He reached out his hand, not touching her, but offering his hand in the space between them. "Then start with this. Don't trust the man I used to be. Trust the man standing in front of you now. Trust the one who showed up at midnight without shoes. Trust the one who hasn't slept in 2 days because he watched our daughter breathe. Trust the one who would give up every deal, every dollar, every ounce of pride, just to stay in this small apartment if that's where you are." She looked at his hand for a long moment, too long, and Alistair felt his heart pound, terrified she would turn away. But then she placed her hand in his, not firmly, not fully, but enough to let him gently, reverently, close his fingers around hers. "I can give you a chance," she whispered. "One chance. If you break it, it's over forever." A breath of relief left him trembling and genuine. "I won't break it. I mean it, Alistair. I mean it too." He stepped closer, their hands still joined, their breaths mingling in the cool evening air. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in slightly, just enough for him to feel her warmth, enough to make their heartbeats violently collide in his chest. Inside the apartment, Owen called for them, his small voice echoing. Eliza let out a soft, tired laugh. "We should go in." Alistair nodded, but didn't release her hand until she gently slipped it free. As they walked back inside, the twins immediately ran toward them, wrapping small arms around their legs. Eliza picked up Alice, and Alistair scooped up Owen, holding the boy with an ease that felt startlingly natural. For the first time, they looked like a family. Not a broken one, not an accidental one, but one finally under construction. The meaningful ending. This story teaches us that a human's greatest power lies not in money or control, but in the capacity to change. Alistair had to be stripped of his arrogance to discover that the bonds of blood and love are the only structures worth building. Eliza showed us that strength is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward for love, even when completely alone. Love does not erase the past, but it can write a stronger future over the scars. If you believe in second chances, hit like and subscribe to support us. Let us know your opinion on whether Eliza did the right thing by giving him that one chance.